monthly. We have lots of exciting content to share with you this year, so I hope that you will continue to join us for future events. My name is Nancy Kelly, and I serve on the steering committee and as a founding member of NYC Builds Bio. I am joined by my fellow founding and steering committee member, Mitch Simpler, managing partner of JBB. Would you like to say hello, Mitch?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new year, and looking forward to a really terrific set of programs, and that will make us all better and smarter in this amazingly emerging field. So, Nancy, take it away.
Thanks, Mitch. I would like to acknowledge the founding and corporate members of NYC Builds Bio who make all of this programming possible, including Triumvirate Environmental. And we have a lot of new people joining us this afternoon. So I just wanted to give you a brief intro to NYC Builds Bio for those of you who are just getting acquainted. NYC Builds Bio is the premier organization for real estate, design, and life science professionals. We connect the life science and real estate communities through events, research, reports, and educational programs, both in person and online. NYC Builds Bio is a 501c3 nonprofit organization serving as the go-to place to find information about and assistance with growing, building, and locating companies in the greater life science companies in the greater New York metro area. We're excited to welcome all of you to the first webinar of our sponsored seminar series with Triumvirate Environmental. This webinar is entitled Overview of the Greater New York Metro Life Sciences Economy and Subclusters. A recent New York City planning study of the Greater New York Metro Life Science Economy concluded that the New York metro area, which includes New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, enjoys the largest life science economy in the United States, and the 2021 census data shows it growing faster than many other regions of the country. We have 6 experts to tell you all about that today. Matthew Laskewitz, Regional Planner, New York City Department of City Planning. Sue Rosenthal, Senior Vice President, Life Sciences and Healthcare, New York City EDC. Lindsey Harding, Director, New Jersey BioScience Center and New Jersey Economic Development Association. Bridget Gibbons, Director, Economic Development, Westchester County, New York. Don Hocevar, President and CEO of BioConnecticut, and John Bordeaux, President of Advance Connecticut. This seminar series will run for 8 episodes from January through August 2022, each covering different life science subclusters in the greater New York metro area in more depth. All of these subclusters are growing up around existing academic institutions and new private life science development in neighborhoods, which each has its own distinct social, culture, and recreational flavor. The next seminar is scheduled for February 22nd on Midtown West and Long Island City in Manhattan. Registration is open, so be sure to sign up after this event to learn more. And be sure to check out our website for other upcoming events. Before I turn it over to Triumvirate Environmental for introductions, I just wanted to cover a few administrative details. We have over 300 people registered for today, so please keep your cameras and microphones off during the program to minimize technical difficulties. There is a program in PowerPoint highlighting the hosts, sponsors, speakers, and content for the meeting. These will be posted on the NYC Builds Bio website. After the meeting, the program is being recorded and will also be available on the website and our YouTube channel. If anyone's having technical difficulties accessing the Zoom room or other issues, please email info@nycbuildsbio.org or send a notice through the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Since most of you are participating in listen-only mode, please feel free to submit your questions via Q&A at the chat button. We will open up for discussion and Q&A at the end of the program, and we will address as many questions as we can. At the end of the meeting, we will also have a chance for smaller randomized groups to meet in separate rooms where you can open your videos and microphones and talk to each other. You can stay as long as you would like to get to know each other and share stories. I think the link to the next series in the webinar series is up in the chat box if you want to take a look. Now I would like to introduce Alicia Aniello, General Manager, New York Branch, Triumvirate Environmental, the lead sponsor for this seminar series. Alicia?
Thank you, Nancy, and Mitch as well. I'm so glad that you agreed to collaborate on this series with us at Triumvirate Environmental. The life science community in the New York metro area benefits so much from all the presentations and events that New York City Builds Bio puts together. Bringing together researchers in the real estate community it was kind of a foreign concept just a handful of years ago, but you noticed that there was a need for that, and you've been putting together really fantastic programming in the past handful of years. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for agreeing to put this series on. As Nancy said, my name is Alicia Aniello. I am the General Manager of Triumvirate's New York and New Jersey operation. Triumvirate has been the premier environmental health and safety service provider to the life science community going on 34 years now. From laboratory moves to regulatory setup, permitting, on-site support, including waste disposal. We've partnered with hundreds of life science companies from their early stages in incubators through to production and manufacturing stages. It's really been awe-inspiring and a privilege to witness some of these ideas come to life. There's been some really, really interesting stuff happening here in New York as well as across the country, of course, but it's really fun when you could see this strange little idea come to life. And to be part of that process. At the request of some of our longest clients in the Cambridge area, because that's where we started in Boston back in 1988. A lot of our long-term clients from Cambridge said, hey, we're moving out to California, 10 years ago, and said, Triumvirate, when are you coming out to California? So what we did, we opened up shop in California so we could continue to service our clients at a national level. And now that we have this national presence, and now that the New York metro area has this huge economy for life science, we're going to be the next life science hotspot. I thought of putting this presentation on as a means to showcase our community's potential to a greater audience. With this New York City Builds Bio series, we're hoping to introduce our life science clients from across the country to the excitement and growth that's happening in the New York metro area. The hotspots now, like Cambridge and San Francisco, they are running out of space. They're charging a premium for some of the limited laboratory space that's left. This is probably the first time in history where it's actually cheaper to move to New York, at least while the going's good. As Nancy mentioned, the potential for collaboration with our research hospitals and universities, along with the growing amount of space dedicated to life science here in the New York area, makes our locale ripe with possibility. It's also going to be the community. This is near and dear to my heart, right? I'm a lifelong New Yorker. It's going to be the community on this call that I think will be key to the revitalization of some of our communities and our post-COVID reality, where so many office workers are now working remotely, right? So there are plenty of spaces that are empty, and if we could fill them with folks from the science space, I think that'd be fantastic. I want to see which slide. We could go to the next slide if you'd like. Triumvirate, just to bring it back to New York, Triumvirate has a full operation in New York City since 2003, including the only commercially permitted hazardous waste facility in the 5 boroughs. We are the only local resource in this market, and having that facility puts us in the same seat as so many of our clients who are under full scrutiny from the New York City DEP, the FDNY, New York State DEC, along with, of course, the EPA and OSHA and all of that. But we're visited very regularly by the regulatory agencies. We've been providing EHS support and consulting, waste disposal support, emergency response services to some of the largest institutions in New York City for over 20 years. We've watched our clients grow within their spaces in New York City and then graduate to large R&D and manufacturing facilities in Westchester and in New Jersey. So we've already seen this migration happening prior, and I think this is a great seminar to allow to showcase for that. We have over 40 consultants local to the New York metro area and a fleet of just as many vehicles providing regulated medical and hazardous waste services in the area. We're providing services to the vast majority of the life science spaces that we will be covering in this 8-part series. We have partnered with these spaces on a variety of levels, either directly with the leasing agencies or with facility management companies or with landlords or with tenants directly or some combination of all of those. We can customize our offerings to fill all EH&S needs through one vendor, thus leaving the researchers to remain hyper-focused on their science and the success of their business, which is really what we want. So again, a just big thank you to Nancy Mitch, New York City Builds Bio, for providing us with this platform to be able to spread the word about the developments here in the New York metro area. Thank you to all of our speakers here today, and of course, those that are going to be joining us in the future parts of the series. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Matt, I think you're up next.
All right. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Alicia, and then thank you all for joining this afternoon. My name is Matt Laskewitz, and I am a regional planner with New York City's Department of City Planning. Now, our office was formed back in 2015 as a way to help the city address challenges that require thinking at a broader metropolitan scale. And so let me start off by saying what we mean when I say the region. So this is a picture of the New York City metropolitan region's economy. Our region covers 3 states, 31 counties, and about 75 miles in every direction from New York City. So that's roughly the reach of our regional rail network. We are the largest economy in the country, and in fact, if we were our own country, we'd have the GDP equivalent of that of about South Korea. So about 50% of our GDP is generated within the city, and about 50% of this GDP is generated outside of the city. So New York City it's the economic hub and engine for our region, but the city and its surroundings are reliant on one another for its continued economic success. And so it is an incredibly diverse economy that fires on all cylinders in a lot of different ways. For example, you can see blue dots. These are hubs for office-based jobs in places like Midtown Manhattan, but also in other places like Stamford, Connecticut, and White Plains, New York, and Westchester County. You can see the yellow dots. These are healthcare and institutional jobs in hubs along the east side of Manhattan, Northwell Health and Stony Brook out in Long Island, Yale and New Haven, and Rutgers down in New Brunswick. You can also see purple industrial manufacturing and warehouse jobs that line major highways and corridors like the I-95 corridor. And so life sciences cuts across all of these industry groups, especially when we're talking about research and development and pharmaceutical manufacturing. And so it struck us that when many people look at New York City's life sciences economy, they're not looking at it from the broader scale of the full region, although other leading life sciences metros, namely Boston and the Bay Area, are looked at through this broader metropolitan scale. So when we took a look at our life sciences economy using the full understanding of our metro region, it painted a very different picture. Next slide, please. Unsurprisingly, because we're the largest economy in the country, we are also the largest life sciences economy in the country when you add us all up together. About 144,000 jobs, which is 20% more than the next leading metro, and it's about 35% more businesses than the next leading metro. And so when you consider all of these clusters together, from Yale and New Haven, Stony Brook, Princeton, and of course, Manhattan and all of the jobs right here in New York City, it's a lot of jobs and a lot of employment in the life sciences across our metro region. Next slide, please. But it's not just jobs, there's also a lot of talent here. Although our metro is home to about 7% of the US population, it houses about 15% of the country's biochemists and biophysicists, and about 10% of the chemists in the United States. We also have about 20,000 clinical lab workers, which is about 25% of our technical life sciences occupations. And so this 84,000 figure you see here is really split up among different parts of our region. About 30% of these workers live in New York City. About 40% of these workers live in northern New Jersey, and the rest are split among the different parts of our region. Next slide, please. Looking at investment, our region is #1 in NIH funding when you compare us to other metros. Boston's at about $2.8 billion, the Bay Area is about 1.5, but we're at more than 3.5 billion when you add up all of the parts of our metro region together. About 70% of that funding comes from New York City-based institutions and organizations. The remaining 30% is coming to institutions and organizations that are within our region, but are outside of New York City. Next slide, please. Our VC funding is still behind the 2 other leading metros, but it's growing at a much more accelerated pace. So we have about $3.3 billion in venture capital funding at last counts. And more than 3/4 of all of the region's VC funding is concentrated in the New York part of our metro region. Next slide, please. And so lastly, if you look at the geography of where this investment is occurring, highly clustered in New York City at the center of our region. So this is a map of the National Institutes of Health funding across our metro. You can explore a dynamic version of this data on our website at nyc.gov/region. But what you see on this slide is Manhattan and the interior of New York City are very important to our overall funding picture. Next slide, please. And so New York City-based institutions account for this 70% of our region's NIH funding. But as you can see, we're surrounded by a constellation of growing clusters. We see Westchester County and areas around Regeneron to the north of the city as one source of this investment. We also see Yale pop out along the Connecticut coast, and Yale being the single greatest source of NIH funding in our region on its own. And then you see Long Island in a cluster around Stony Brook, as well as clusters closer in towards Queens. And then if you track down in northern New Jersey, there are major medical education institutions like Princeton, New Brunswick, and Newark that line the Northeast Corridor rail. And so all of these clusters are connected to one another through our region's rail network, which truly is a competitive advantage and is the connective tissue that allows talented workers to flow from one part of our region to another. And this funding towards transit-oriented locations matches what we've seen in lab space investment, as well as startup growth in our metro area. And so when you look at all of this together, it paints a picture for enormous opportunity for New York City as the center of a very large and a growing life sciences ecosystem. And with that, I will turn things back over to Nancy. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting to me, Matt, especially is that this sits right at the heart of the Eastern Corridor, right? From Boston all the way down to North Carolina, connected by Amtrak. And so it's kind of right in the center there. And this is also, we should point out, the largest concentration of life science and tech activity in the world. It's not just the country. This East Corridor, which I just talked about, it's very significant.
Nancy, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as a regionalist that we tend to think in terms of different scales. And what you suggest here is something that we think about in part, which is how you have the city and you have our metro region, but we're part of a Northeast mega region that stretches from Boston all the way down to the Carolinas with that rail corridor as its main link. And another part of the work that we do is think about the region's transportation investments, and the city, the state, and the federal government are all working in concert to invest in our rail infrastructure as well. So I think it bodes well for the future of connectivity within our metro area and throughout the greater Northeast, with New York being right in the center of it, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so now let's focus on each of these submarkets and find out specifically what's going on. Sue, do you want to tell us about New York?
Thank you, Nancy, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's really lovely to be here. I lead our New York City Economic Development Corporation's Life Sciences and Healthcare team. And just like Matt and everyone here, we're really proud of our region. And we know it's incredibly important to invest in the talent and the infrastructure needed to continue to build on the opportunity in life sciences that will bring much opportunity for our economy and for all of our constituents. So with that, if you can go to the next slide. We've been investing in life sciences in New York City for some time. We focus on industries at EDC that show resiliency and promise given our talent and our innovative strengths. And in 2016, the city announced a major investment of $500 million in life sciences. And unfortunately, with a bit of a silver lining, the pandemic only heightened our awareness of life sciences and the opportunity. And fortunately for the industry, it showed both the value of the industry and its response to the pandemic, whether that was through testing or vaccines and therapeutics, as well as life sciences being one of the industries that frankly stayed open and grew over the past 2 years. And so given that, former Mayor de Blasio announced with EDC that the city is doubling that investment this past June to $1 billion. And as you can see on the right, further, Mayor Adams incorporating our plans for growth in his 100-day plan during the election to show his support for our initiative. And we don't take our foot off the pedal. With that, we've only continued to keep things growing in the city. And so how are we doing that? If you go to the next slide, we're focusing on taking the great building blocks that we have in New York City and the region, specifically our talent and our science, and helping translate that into products and platforms that can be commercialized into companies that will form and grow, whether they're from New York City institutions or companies that are expanding their operations here, and the resulting jobs and access to those skills and career paths for New Yorkers of all backgrounds. And the evidence shows that we're making great headway, and we've grown quite a bit since that 2016 announcement. Go to the next slide, please. So this map shows New York City before 2016, where you can see we had the foundation of great institutions, whether that be our universities, our academic medical centers, other research centers like the Genome Center or the Stem Cell Foundation. We also had the beginnings of the incubators and the step-out spaces that we need across the city, like Alexandria on the east side, or Harlem Biospace in the Tacey building in West Harlem, BioBat in Brooklyn. If you could go to the next slide, please. And since then, we've made a concerted effort to build more of the infrastructure needed, as well as clustering that infrastructure to help resourcing and talent, draw together into the clusters that you need for life sciences. And you can see several of them are emerging. There's a cluster in Kips Bay. There's a cluster developing in Long Island City. There's one on the west side in Hudson Square and Midtown West. And thinking regionally, these clusters are working really well given the proximity to transit, whether that's local within New York City or across the tri-state area. And we're really mindful to support that regional leadership in life sciences, as we know there's a talent flow in and out of the city for this industry that's critical to all of our success. We've seen many of these investments come to fruition, and I'd like to highlight just a few as examples to show the approach we're taking for the long-term success of the industry. Next slide, please. So Velastra Therapeutics is a spin-out from Weill Cornell. They're working on chromosomal instability to develop therapeutics to fight cancer that now calls West Harlem its home. And you can see from the social media posts here that they're very active in our ecosystem, supporting the talent that we are growing and elevating New York City in life sciences. And originally, before Velastra took over this space, EDC invested in building that space, and Velastra grew into that location from its launch in New York City at J-Labs. And Matt showed earlier, points about VC funding and NIH funding and how it's grown in the region. That's translating into companies like this one growing and choosing not only to locate, but for talent choosing to locate in New York City as well. And some additional examples we see of great capitalization like this and then expansion are happening quite frequently. So we see whether that were recent announcements by ImmuneAI or OpenTrons or StableX or Black Diamond. We could keep naming many of these examples from the past few months. And if you think about it, 10 years ago, you could probably count the number of life sciences companies in New York City just out loud. But that's changed quite a bit. And prior to the pandemic, we did a scan to see how much progress had happened and how much had developed. And at the time, this was about November of 2019, we counted 150 life sciences companies. We've now seen that double. In the fall in 2021, we did another count and we found 300 companies at that time. And we've also seen the raises that these companies are announcing grow as we've seen companies move from seed to Series A, B, and C, and IPO as well. And we've heard continued sentiment that the talent and innovation is here in New York City and in our region. Next slide, please. So I also wanted to highlight a similar and yet different example. C16 BioSciences is a startup that recently expanded from biolabs at NYU Langone into the Hudson Research Center. And I highlight C16 because they produce a sustainable alternative to palm oil, which is not your traditional life sciences company. But life sciences is broad. It's really the intersection of biology and technology. And that includes using chemistry and synthetic biology to create foods like synthetic palm oil or products related to sustainability. And we believe New York City has an advantage here, given its experience in a number of industries, whether that be tech or food or fashion or more. And while traditional life sciences is a large focus of the biotech investment community, we also recognize the opportunity in adjacent life sciences verticals. And we're making investments to take advantage of those intersections and see New York City already as a leader in this space. Next slide. And our last example is one of several infrastructure investments we've made to make sure companies have the resources they need, whether it be incubation space or step out space, and also that talent is being developed in New York City such that companies will have access to great leaders and great functional expertise on the cutting edge of science, whether that be to grow a company from scratch or to scale up, or to help in other functions like business operations. And we're focused on ensuring that talent development and access to career paths is done equitably, and that New York City does what it can now to close gaps in equity at the same time, through efforts like those that are shown at the bottom of the slide, where we're investing in diverse entrepreneurs and talent, and through programs, next slide please, like our great internship program, which has been running for over 4 years now and has had over 400 interns across well over 100 companies. And so what's next? If you go to the next slide, please. Well, when I started, I shared that New York City is bullish on life sciences and has doubled its investment. And we foresee several investments being announced or coming online this year. And over the course of the next couple of years, by about 2024, we anticipate seeing 3 to 4 million square feet coming online. And investment in startups, we expect to continue to expand and keep going on the pace that they've been going, such that companies and talent will keep choosing New York City and this region as their home. We're definitely here for it, and we know that that will lead to a healthier New York and a healthier region. And with that, Nancy, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great, so exciting. You know, as somebody who's been involved in the growth and development of this sector in New York for over 20 years now, doesn't seem possible. It just
Nancy, you're one of the founders. Credit to you for helping lay the foundation for all of this.
It's so gratifying to see it all come together like that. And all the programs that you've put in place are just amazing in terms of bringing the community together as well. So congratulations for all of this. Next, we're going to move over to New Jersey, where there is a similar growth story happening. And Lindsey, you were in New York, you're now in New Jersey, and helping to lead the charge over there.
Yes, thank you, Nancy, for bringing this panel together to cover the region. I appreciate that, and thank you for Susan. Enjoyed that presentation. My name is Lindsey Harding. I'm the director of the New Jersey BioScience Center. This is NJEDA's research park. And I also get involved with some of the other states' life science real estate initiatives. Prior to EDA, as Nancy mentioned, I was with New York City EDC. So really, congratulations to Susan and the team in New York City for the continued success with the Life Sci NYC program. I really feel it's great for the region, and I hope we can get back later during the Q&A to some of the discussion that Matt started regarding kind of a regional perspective. So next slide. So I'm going to talk about the New Jersey life science ecosystem from the real estate angle, starting with the New Jersey BioScience Center. This is the park that I am associated with. It's a 50-acre research park, some 30 miles down the turnpike from the Holland Tunnel. 300,000 square feet of life sciences space for startups and growing companies. There's incubator space, there's post-incubation space. We do have one large tenant in the form of BI, but most of the space here is held by early stage companies. And I'll go into that. Next slide. So at the other extreme from Borouge Ingelheim is the Incubator at North Brunswick. It's 46,000 square feet, 27 private wet labs. Solvent-friendly, chemical-friendly environment, office and storage, lots of air handling equipment, and air turnover is pretty high. A small lab like you see here is 900 square feet. It's a private lab. Includes a chem hood. It's about $2,600 a month. And for certain biotech companies that may qualify, there's a program called NJ Ignite, so they can get 4 or 5 more months, perhaps free, if you're eligible. And NJ Ignite is one of several programs. Our incubator has had some notable graduates. Amicus, GeneWiz started here. Right now, we do have some interesting companies. There's a Cornell Medical School spin out that's Sonder RX located here and continues to expand. We have a company in the IVF space with license, technology in license from Michigan State University. We have an oncology company with technology in license from WashU. So it's a good community and good space. Additional space actually will be opening up very soon. So next slide. So demand for biotech space in New Jersey, and I think most everywhere right now over the past couple of years, has been particularly strong. Some of the biggest demand for us has been what I call kind of the post-incubation space. This sort of sweet spot of 2,000 to 8,000 square feet. One product that we have for this niche is a multi-tenant environment called the Step-Out Labs. We have other private spaces as well, 5,000 and 7,000 and 12,000. But the case of the Step-Out Labs, it's a multi-tenant environment with a lot of shared resources for companies graduating from the incubator and also, biopharma companies with modest lab needs. They have a lot of resources there available to them. Next slide. But my research park isn't the only game in the state, according to CB Richard Ellis, JLL, some of their annual reports. There's over 20 million square feet of life sciences space in New Jersey. The samples listed here, the line items reflect those sites that are developed and under development, but the 20 million top level number is existing space. And so that's a lot of space. It's competitive with RTP and a lot of areas outside of Boston and San Francisco, but it does really speak to the level of activity that's taking place here in New Jersey's life sciences ecosystem, both pharma and on the entrepreneurial side. And since Jersey is a center of pharma, a lot of the 20 million square feet is owner occupied by those companies. But there have been several former pharma sites that have been redeveloped and converted to multi-tenant sites. So there's a couple of examples on here. The first one is the On3 campus. This is the former Roche site, some 10 miles outside the Lincoln Tunnel, 116 acres, eventually 1 million square feet. Modern Meadow is there. Quest built their largest diagnostic facility there at 250,000 square feet. Hackensack Meridian is there. Center of Excellence is in Bridgewater. This is a former Sanofi site. Close to 1 million square feet of space there. That's owned and operated by Thor. Princeton West is actually a former BMS site in Princeton, Hopewell area, about 1 million square feet, 433 acres. PTC Therapeutics signed a 185,000 square foot lease there recently. And there's several others that are listed on there, perhaps a little bit closer to the city or a couple of multi-tenant projects in Jersey City. Nancy mentioned, or will mention, the Cove, I believe. It's 14 acres, 3 million square feet under development, half of which is life sciences and healthcare. Then that's an exciting project. 95 Green is a former Colgate toothpaste factory that has some new tenants as well. Not listed here, and really more of institutional site for research collaborations, and we'll have some tenant space as well. There's a new site under development called the Hub in New Brunswick. It's adjacent to a rail line, which, as Matt mentioned, is very important. It's adjacent to Rutgers. It's adjacent to J&J headquarters site. And it's bringing together Princeton, Rutgers, Hackensack Meridian as some of the anchor tenants. There was a groundbreaking in December to get that program underway. And there's even other private investment that's taken place recently in the state. There's a company out of India called Aurobindo that not that long ago built 600,000 square feet of life sciences space in East Windsor. That brings their total to 1 million square feet in the state that they've built alone. So our pain point isn't as much lab space, because there's space that's here and it's under development. But I would say, we know we do need more appropriate spaces that are closer to the urban area. So that's one of the reasons that the Cove is an exciting development moving forward. Next slide. And filling that space is a lot of name brand pharma companies and some small companies as well. There's some 2,200 life science companies residing in New Jersey. Next slide. And those companies draw a lot of talent. Central and North Jersey is ripe with pharma talent. And as you can see here, it compares favorably to other regions. So it's a great pharma community with a good cross-section of talent. Next slide. And so there's pharma talent, and then there's also entrepreneurial activity as well. I mentioned the site I'm associated with, Incubator in North Brunswick, but there's other incubator sites. Celgene started a nice incubator in Summit with John Anthus at the lead a few years ago. BMS, of course, operates that site, and it's ongoing. The Princeton Biolabs site is depicted here. That's part of the Biolab franchise that's across the country. At NJIT, which is an engineering school, the VentureLink program run by Will Lutz actually has some lab space as well in their incubator. Keene University has a beautiful space called ILSA, and complementing some of their incubator space, a variety of programs, including an accelerator. So there's activity at the early stage entrepreneurial end as well. Next slide. And I won't cover all of this, but there are some incentive programs, and there are some existing ones and some that we've expanded as well. I think one of the most interesting ones for drug discovery biotech is the angel investor tax credit. Angel, it's really for institutional investors as well. But this is where companies can get, investors can get 20% return on their investment, up to 25 in some cases. For a tech or life science company that's in New Jersey, it's a maximum of $500,000 per investor per round, annual pool of $35 million. It's fully refundable, meaning that the angel or the institutional investor doesn't have to be located in New Jersey. We have one of our companies in the research park. They've been very successful at raising tranches of $8 to $10 million. Most of their investors, whether they are high net worth individuals or institutional investors, are located in Europe. It's fully refundable. The checks go to Europe. Net operating loss program, unless you're doing research reagents or services, you're losing money in drug discovery. And so this is a way to monetize some of those losses. Evergreen Fund is actually a new co-investment fund that will be launched soon. So there's other programs, but with that, Nancy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that's really exciting story, Lindsey, especially after the transition that New Jersey has gone through with the pharmaceutical industry over the last 10 years or so. And to see the economy shifting towards this more, entrepreneurial activity is really exciting.
Thank you.
Great. So now we're going to move north of New York City to Westchester County. Bridget, you want to tell us what's going on up there?
Yes, thank you so much, Nancy. And the presentation so far have just been so informative, and I think really shed a lot of light on how vital our region is. Before I jump into my presentation, I just want to say the bottom line is Westchester County is open for biosciences businesses. We have a robust ecosystem with Regeneron as the heart of the ecosystem, pumping vitality throughout the county. All those maps and graphics that Matt showed you, Westchester County is almost dead in the middle. So we really do have always had a regional approach, and the businesses here, the biosciences businesses here in Westchester, hire employees not only from Westchester and the city, but also Connecticut and New Jersey. So we've always had kind of a regional perspective. I do think Westchester is a well-kept secret. So our goal is to really educate people about our ecosystem. And we've had a lot of success over the last year when we really put a concerted effort into this. And we're really getting the word out about Westchester County, not only in the region and the country, but also in the world. So we're really excited about kind of bringing Westchester out with more visibility. So next slide, please. So Westchester County Life Sciences ecosystem, Westchester accounts for 20% of all New York State life sciences employment. That's due in large part to Regeneron, but we do have a robust ecosystem. We're the 5th largest life sciences cluster in the United States. Patents issued have doubled from 2000 to 2015, up to 1,307. We have research institutes focusing on neurosciences and brain injury, autism, and other forms. We're in the process of developing a rare disease hub. There are clinical trials network with $5 million grant from New York State. We have the Westchester County BioSciences Accelerator Program, which we started 3 years ago. We're up to have 18 startups that have gone through or will be going through that program. We have a life sciences incubator at the New York Medical College, and lots of other associated experts and real estate, which I'll go into further in the presentation. Next slide, please. So here's a list of our academic institutions and research institutes. I think, again, this is kind of basic information, but I don't think Westchester is really as well known as some of the other areas in our region. So we have plenty of institutions, colleges, with all sorts of specializations. So next slide, please. And hospitals, we have, branches of the hospitals that are, throughout the region have opened in Westchester County, Montefiore, New York Presbyterian, Northwell, and we have a large medical institution, a Westchester Medical Center in Valhalla. So we're very robust and very dynamic and important healthcare sector in Westchester County. Next slide, please. We have a mix of, all sorts of biosciences companies ranging from drug development, startups and established companies. Regeneron, of course, which developed the Regeneron therapeutic, which was used by one of our prior presidents when he was diagnosed with COVID. So well-known treatment coming from Regeneron, but many of our other startups and companies in Westchester County were involved in the response to COVID, but also, just a really robust infrastructure here. So next slide, please. It's kind of small, but we have an interactive map where we mapped out all of the biosciences companies as well as related companies. And if you get your hands on this presentation and click on that link, you'll see, we have 186 entities that we have mapped. And I know there's a plan and a goal of mapping the entire region so that all the participants in the region in life sciences would be on one map. But you can see the density here, and we do have a physical cluster in kind of the central part of the county where Regeneron is, New York Medical College, and a lot of and some other development will be taking place to really fill out that cluster. So next slide, please. And NIH grants, $150 million in grants in Westchester County between 2012 and 2020. You can see there's kind of an area of excellence around aging, neurology, neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, and spinal cord injury. That accounts for 45% of the NIH grants in Westchester County. So, we are in that 30% that Matt referred to, and we have about $150 million in NIH grants. Next slide, please. We have established a biosciences task force, and that we established at the beginning of 2021, really to put a concerted effort and a focus on the biosciences in Westchester County. We know we have areas that need attention and need growth. We have a talent pipeline committee. We're focused on incentives and investment. Unlike the states that surround us and New York City, we as a county, we don't have a lot of tools that we can bring to bear to attract and retain businesses. So we know that we need to develop those and establish incentives, and we're looking to establish an investment fund. Real estate, we do have incubator, we do have step out space. I think it's a matter of kind of organizing it and really letting people know what we have here that's available. And we need to establish more suitable graduation space. We focused on the supply chain, wanting to build that out so that more of the production and development and manufacturing is done here in Westchester County. We're looking to establish a soft landings program that would allow us to attract and retain more businesses here. And we are looking to establish more support for our earliest stage companies. Next slide, please. One of the key components of our ecosystem is the North 60. That is a project that is in development. It will allow us to have, it will be a total of 80 acres devoted to life sciences with combination of lab space, a medical office, residential, hotel, and restaurants. And it will be a live, work, play campus. We're looking forward to having that on board. If we go to the next slide, please. So this kind of shows you we'll have medical office, biotech and research. There'll be a children's science and education center, shopping, hotel, etc. So 3 million square feet is in the process of kind of getting towards shovel in the ground and development. So we're looking forward to that, really kind of establishing, and that also is adjacent to Regeneron and the New York Medical College, and so really bolstering the physical cluster of life sciences in Westchester. Next slide, please. And of course, Regeneron, they just announced that they have 2 phases of development on their campus. The area that's highlighted in red is phase 1, and phase 2 are the gray buildings, which they just came to Westchester County to describe that phase 2, that they're going to be kind of moving forward on that. So a total of 900,000 square feet will be added to their campus. 8 buildings, 3 parking garages, power plant, up to 1,000 new employees, which will really, that is a significant impact on Westchester County and the biosciences ecosystem here. We're looking to support them in any way we can, as of course, workforce development, and and in any way we can, make sure that that really happens, on schedule, and that it really will have a tremendous impact on Westchester County. So next slide, please. The BioInk at New York Medical College, that is our biosciences incubator. Next slide, please. And there are many great features. It's very fairly new, turnkey, affordable lab space. They've added conference space and meeting rooms and office space there. It's on the New York Medical College campus, so you have access to collaborate with the faculty and researchers and students and interns, etc. So it's a highly successful incubator. I think it's not well known, so we are doing our best to kind of get the word out there that this is a great alternative incubator to the city or whatever, if people want to kind of be in a more residential area, that this incubator is a great opportunity. Next slide, please. More about BioInk's the facilities features. And of course, you can review this if you get your hands on the presentation. Next slide, please. Some of BioInk's residents: Affinity Biotechnologies, Sapience Therapeutics, a fast-growing company here in Westchester, MediSprout, telehealth. So lots of great activity happening here. Next slide, please. Oh, so if you would like further information or to talk about anything I presented, you can reach me at bgibbons@westchestergov.com. So thank you very much.
That was a great presentation, Bridget. It just shows the richness of what is happening in the greater New York metro area. There's just such a diversity of projects and very, very exciting. Regeneron especially being, one of the big success stories from startup to, huge pharmaceutical, fully integrated pharmaceutical company now, which has been amazing.
Yeah, it's really been, it is the landmark company in the region, I'd say, and they're really and they're great corporate citizens. So we're really delighted that they're in Westchester County.
Yeah, yeah. So now we turn to Connecticut, which is the last submarket, but not least. I was born and raised in Connecticut and went to Yale and been on the board of the Jackson Lab for years and years. So lots going on that's near and dear to my heart. Dawn?
Thank you very much, Nancy, and it's terrific to be with all of you today. So as this was mentioned, we are a subcluster to the New York Metro Life Sciences, and here's a quick tri-state map to show you where we sit. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm sorry, I want to back up and say I'm Dawn Hocevar, President and CEO of BioCT. We are the industry trade association for life sciences in Connecticut. And also with me today, who you'll hear from in a little bit, is John Bordeaux, and he is the president of Advanced CT, which is the retention recruitment arm for the state of Connecticut. So for those of you that are not familiar, this is the map of Connecticut, and we have from Stanford, New Haven, Branford, actually up towards Rhode Island is the I-95 corridor. And not shown on the map in the northern region near Rhode Island is where Pfizer is located. And Pfizer, they have their largest R&D campus is in Connecticut, and they are expanding as we speak. So, you know, that's terrific for Connecticut. And on the opposite side of the state, closer towards the New York border, is Boehringer Ingelheim's headquarters. And they're in the Ridgefield area. And they have about 6,000 employees, similar to Pfizer. And one other anchor for us is Medtronics, who is located in New Haven. And that's a major center for Medtronics. So what's going on? New Haven is the epicenter for the life sciences, and that is due to Yale. Yale has done a tremendous job of spinning out commercializing companies over the last 10 years. Alexion being one of them, that was a spin out of Yale, is now, was acquired last year by AstraZeneca. And for those who have heard, Alexion left New Haven, only the headquarters went to Boston. Alexion, the R&D center never left, and they have about 600 employees, and AstraZeneca is leaving Alexion in New Haven, and that is their rare disease arm of the pharmaceutical company. And with all of that growth that's going on, there has been expansion. So for instance, Farmington is where we have Jackson Laboratories, we have the UConn Health Centers, we have some incubators that I'll get into in a moment. Stanford is really our up and coming digital bioinformatics IT space. UConn has a campus in Stanford and have just launched an incubator, an IT incubator in that area. And as many of you may have heard, Semaphore moved to the Stanford area from Mount Sinai in New York, and they're just continuing to expand and gobble up companies. And then Branford is a cluster of graduation space for companies that have outgrown the incubator space in the state. And I'll get into a minute of what the incubators are all about. But as you can see around the map is just an example of some of the companies that are here in Connecticut. Next slide, please. So regarding lab space, just wanted to give you an overview of up and coming growing lab space in the area. This is above and beyond any square foot of pharma space, et cetera, that already exists in the state. So in New Haven, we have a developer that has been phenomenal for this industry. And Carter Wynn Stanley originally built the Alexion building. And now 101 College is going to be a sister building to that. They've already broken ground. 500,000 square feet, 10 stories with 50,000 square feet of incubator space. And that incubator is going to be run and managed by BioLabs. So BioLabs is now in Connecticut, and it's just a very, very exciting time. And where those buildings are is really the innovation corridor, Highway 34, for the build out of life sciences in New Haven. For example, 115 Munson is in the Science Park area, and that's about 140,000 square feet of lab space, which will be a live work residential retail space as well. They've got several companies in the 115 Munson Science Park area today. And then also in New Haven is 55 Church Street, which is the Elm City Biocenter. And that was office space that has been converted and is being converted to lab space, 114,000 square feet, 5 stories, lab office space. And then because Branford has a lot of the graduation space today, and those companies are continuing to grow and outgrow their space, there is a conversation going on now to develop an innovation park in Branford, which is 15 minutes north of New Haven, which will have initially 90,000 square feet of lab office space with a second 90,000 square foot building coming online. So those are just some examples of the amount of activity that's going on here in New Haven and the general region. Next slide, please. So incubators, we have up in Farmington is the UConn Technology Incubator Program. And they have about 40, 45 companies in that incubator and have raised millions of dollars. And a lot of those companies that have graduated in turn went to Branford and are expanding. Groton, there is a BioCT Innovation Commons, which is an incubator space with about 23 companies there. And we were able to create that because Pfizer, who is right next door, donated a building to us, and we got $4.5 million from the state and created this wet lab office incubator space, which has been very successful. And then New Haven, as I mentioned, BioLabs is coming in and putting in incubator space. And then Pierce Laboratories, Pierce Institute right next to Yale, just opened up an incubator space there as well, which BioCT is managing for them. And then Stanford has the incubator space for, as I mentioned before, digital IT incubation. So it's just tremendous excitement, and we're seeing nothing but constant growth here. Next slide, please. So some of the centers of excellence I just want to make note of is UConn Health. They're doing a lot of research and a lot of papers on different areas of cell line growth, et cetera. The Yale Center for Immuno-Oncology and also the Yale Wu-Tsai Institute, which are focusing on a lot of the digital, psychological, biological, computational sciences. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Bordeaux from Advanced CT. He can introduce himself and then take over on the slides. Thank you, John.
Thanks a lot, Dawn. I appreciate it. And thank you, Nancy, and thank you to Triumvirate for hosting today. And thanks to my colleagues across the region as well. There's no doubt that this region has numerous assets across it that will attract and retain some of the most exciting life sciences and bioscience companies in the world, and are being spun out from this region right now. And it's exciting to hear about the innovation that's going on across the region. Just it's really, really energizing. In Connecticut, one of our assets that we are proud of is Connecticut Innovations, which has a $200 million evergreen fund specifically earmarked for life sciences. And our work here with Connecticut Innovations is and one of the reasons why it can be evergreen is that the companies that they're investing in are constantly growing and graduating, and their investments are paying off. And Connecticut Innovations is the leading investor in the state of Connecticut across the board, and provides not only the money, but the strategic guidance, the direction, the connections that a region like ours, a state like Connecticut, we are tightly knit together, and it's in a way that these young companies can be truly given the best opportunity to succeed across the board. Next slide, please. You certainly heard a lot about Yale University. Matt mentioned the largest recipient of NIH funding, but the Yale's Office of Cooperative Research has been working carefully with the faculty and the research arms of the university that are producing multiple companies, 48 in the last 5 years, nearly $1 billion investment capital raised. Yale is a engine here in New Haven that is creating a ecosystem, and certainly a bright star in the middle of that universe. Yale's spinoffs of companies and the way that the university has played a strong role in nurturing the ecosystem is a significant asset for this part of our state and for the ecosystem in general. And being right in the middle of that I-95 corridor between Stamford on the one side and Groton on the other, as Don mentioned, where so many wonderful things are happening. It's definitely at the crossroads of bioscience here in Connecticut. The fact that Yale has made a commitment not only to New Haven but to this ecosystem for multiple years is a significant asset, and we anticipate that they will continue and accelerate their spin outs over the course of the next several years, and we're very excited about it. Next slide, please. University of Connecticut, which Don also mentioned, is the largest producer of STEM graduates in Connecticut. And I think it's important to note that, as we look across this region, certainly we think about all of this a lot in Connecticut. Workforce is an absolute vital component that companies are thinking about, and certainly in the life sciences. With UConn's commitment, they are producing and thinking very carefully and working hand in glove with industry to help tailor the programs that graduates are receiving in order so that graduates are coming into the job market ready to work and ready to participate in these companies, big and small, across Connecticut. And the companies that are not here yet are the ones that are going to be spun out from Yale in the next 6 months. And this is a really important component of the overall strategy here in Connecticut. The Governor Lamont's Workforce Council has been thinking for long and hard and strategically about this. And our workforce development initiatives are not just a roundtable of university presidents and CEOs, although that does exist. Everyone who's involved in that is involved in multiple levels, so that the tactical fulfillment of workforce development is achieved, and not just bullet points on a strategic plan, but actual tactical fulfillment, as I mentioned, at the university level, where graduates are being trained for the jobs that are coming, not just the jobs that are available. And ensuring that we have the workforce available to the companies that are here, that are growing, that are coming, and that are being created is a vital component of our strategy here in Connecticut. And needless to say, across the region, and this one of the beautiful things about this region is it is concentrated. and the ability for us to work, whether it's across this ecosystem of universities, which in the Northeast here in this region is really second to none. I would put our university systems in Connecticut in this region up against anybody's in the world. And I know that we would come out ahead very similarly to the way that, as Matt presented in the beginning, the way that that our ecosystem here is the largest in the world. I would say that our universities and our workforce is really second to none, and we're extremely proud of that. Next slide, please. As was mentioned, a little bit further upstate is the Jackson Lab, and anybody who's involved in research knows Jackson Lab for a couple of different reasons, not least of which their genetics and genomics work is really on the leading edge. But of course, they are in the vivarium and research mouse business. So I encourage you, just for the fun of it, you can go onto the Jackson Lab website and get the genetically designed mouse of your choice, which I highly encourage. But it is a cornerstone in research. And Jackson Labs, when they expanded out of their headquarters in Bar Harbor, Maine, landed in Connecticut, and we're very proud to have them as a significant component of our ecosystem. And as a research institution, a nonprofit research institution, Jackson Labs plays a very similar role to organizations like Yale and UConn in the state, and is investing heavily in the primary research and providing the tools to the researchers here in a collaborative fashion to help new companies and the companies that are here be very, very successful. Next slide, please. As Dawn mentioned, I'm the president of Advanced CT. We are here to help any organization in Connecticut or outside Connecticut to come to our region and be successful, and to provide those services to those who might need them, and to help grow this community. Next slide. And then, of course, Dawn, as the head of BioCT, my job is to help companies be successful here, and Dawn's job is to help make sure that our ecosystem is vibrant, connected, and growing. And being a component and part and an important part of this region, as I said at the beginning, is very, very energizing to us here in Connecticut, and to see all that we're accomplishing as a region and the assets that we have and that we share with one another is extremely exciting. And with that, we'll pass it back to you, Nancy, with our thanks and appreciation.
Yeah, just terrific presentation. And it's really amazing to watch the development and growth of this industry. You know, having been involved when the Jackson Lab first made the decision to locate their genomics facility in Farmington. Even just since then, the state has changed so much and really deepened its industry. So congratulations to Dawn and to you and to everybody who's been involved with that. You know, as I've been sitting here listening to you, I've been thinking a lot about the regional play and the regional focus that the federal government is really kind of putting on technology and life sciences in particular. And the whole Build Back Better program, which the Department of Commerce just had a program which gave out grants for the development of regional hubs. And North Carolina was the recipient of one of those. So there were a couple of actually life science hubs that got grants for, doing regional initiatives. And we saw, in the discussion with Matt, the rail systems that kind of connect us all, the bridges, the water systems. So if we are connected, what would a regional life sciences initiative look like if we were all going to be working together? Let's say we were thinking about applying for a federal grant that would really bring our region together and showcase it. What might that look like? Matt, do you have a thought on that? Let's start with you.
Well, I would defer on others to the specifics on it, just because I come from a planning and economic development background generally. But what I would say is we have all the right ingredients here. So we have that access to talent. I think New York City, there's been much in the news the last few years about, oh, is this the death of cities? Is this the death of New York City? And in fact, quite the opposite, in which you've seen record rent and record investment happening here in the city, and you've seen people coming back to New York City and back to cities generally. So I would say we have the talent base here. We have the investment that is really growing in the city, and we have the ability to get folks from one part of the city to the other. We have such a dynamic economy, and something that we've thought about is part of the attraction of New York City isn't just an opportunity for you to get a job, it's an opportunity for your partner or your spouse to get a job as well. There's such a diverse ecosystem of different types of jobs here in New York and the surrounding region that is our competitive advantage. It always has been access to these amenities as well. So in terms of what a regional play would look like, I would defer to the others, but I think we have all the right ingredients to make one right here.
Well, I'll jump in there. Excuse me, Sue. But,
Go ahead, Lindsay. I'll
I
jump
think
after you.
when I look at the study we keep referencing that Matt and his colleagues put together, I mean, number one that jumps out is that as a region, New York City Metro has the largest life science economy in the US. So certainly what it could possibly look like would be from a marketing perspective. You know, the real estate studies that I referenced earlier during my presentation talked about New Jersey and how much life science space is there. And of course, other pages of those studies and reports reference talent as well. But, you know, when you look at from the talent perspective, we really have the ability to raise a regional red flag here because talent likes to go where talent is. You know, we're the only, we're really the only large life science region that's sliced and diced into 3 different states, you know, and I say it's not fair, right? When you look at the life science region of Cambridge, it fans out, you know, for miles into 128. It's still collectively represented in one report. And, you know, the same thing can be said for the San Francisco Bay Area. You know, it's Santa Clara is 40 miles away from San Francisco. It's a huge geography. And so, you know, from that perspective, I don't know why we can't represent it. I mean, my God, San Francisco, their football team's 40 miles away. And Giants Jets Stadium Meadowlands is only 7 miles from Times Square. So, you know, there's justification for that alone. So, you know, I think there's an argument to be made to throw a blanket from a marketing perspective over the entire region to represent all of our key assets, not only in terms of life science, real estate, which I default to, but I think just the talent piece is so important from what Matt talked about before and what we used to always talk about in New Jersey, for that matter, New York City, is, you know, you have a region where a trailing spouse will find opportunities when locating to the region, and that's hard in some other areas.
Yeah, great. Sue?
Yeah, if I could build on what Lindsay is saying, you know, we see the flow of talent in and out of the city across the region quite heavily, right? So, you know, we heard about Regeneron earlier. We know there's quite a bit of talent that commutes to Regeneron from the city and vice versa, that comes in from Westchester and Connecticut into the city, and the same for New Jersey. And I from my own career in life sciences, I was based in New York City. I supported pharma companies out in New Jersey. You know, we know that talent flow is happening, and to Lindsay's point of talent wants to be where talent is, we see that in New York, that companies want to locate in those clusters, but also people want to know that they have the job opportunity they're in right now. And if that biotech, something happens, because biotech is risky, that they will have opportunity in other ways for other companies. And we're seeing that more and more. And you know, there's a company that folded, it was in 2019 or early 2020, where all of the employees found their next job in New York City. And we actually monitored that because we were curious to see what would happen. And because we think that that's the type of momentum you need to see the trajectory of growth in the industry, and that those people that all landed in new jobs in New York City then shared that with their constituents in their network, and that attracts talent to continue to want to be here. The other part that I'll say, and then I'll come to the actual question, is, we actually hear from CEOs and CSOs that New York City feels different in terms of both retention and, I keep using this word, it's my word of the week, gumption, and that we see that the talent in this region is really hungry for growth and development in life sciences, and that there's the retention part is that there's a loyalty to company growth and to the science that's being developed, that we hear remarkably. It feels different in New York for the talent that's here. And so one of the thoughts I had for your question about how could we, as a region, go for some of the federal funding, I absolutely agree that we'd have to, work it out across the group. But I do think there's certainly a talent opportunity. And given where we are as an industry, where we are as a world, I think there's a real opportunity in talent development to make sure that we're closing gaps in equity. And so the first part of that would be to understand what, make sure we align on what skills and talent areas are needed, and how those can be served by different types of degrees and certifications and qualifications. You don't need a PhD for every job in life sciences. In fact, I think it's the exact opposite. It's like, 1/10 or 1/8 of jobs in life sciences are advanced degrees. And so how can we make sure that we are, advancing, we're growing those advanced degrees in an equitable way, but also that we are making the career paths for many different backgrounds more available to the talent of our region.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the kind of the flavor that's being discussed here is, as a region, we also have the ability to create the quality of life for people to, not everybody wants to live in downtown Manhattan. Not everybody wants to live in Connecticut. Not everybody wants to live in New Jersey. But between the three states, we have enough diversity and quality of life and ecosystems that would cater to a lot of people. When Alexion did move their headquarters to Boston, and when BMS left Connecticut years ago, 90% of their workforces would not go, because people love being here. And, there's nothing like the shoreline. There's nothing like, the lack of transportation issues that some other places have. Now, again, there are the younger people who want the hubbub of the city, and they want to be in the Manhattan, et cetera. So there's a lid for every pot. And I think that there's a way as a region that we could make sure that we're accommodating anybody who's looking to come to our region, that if, our state or your particular spot isn't quite what they're looking for, well then, hey, you should look at this or that, because there's no reason people have to go to California. So that's another thing to think about as well.
Yep.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about the map that Bridget brought up about Westchester County, and thinking about, your digital incubator there in Southern Connecticut. And if we had a regional map of where companies were located and institutions were located, and it was, relatively comprehensive, you could begin to see where the technology pockets are in terms of where they're developing, so maybe synthetic biology is in New York, maybe, digital health is in Southern Connecticut, and Westchester would be something else. But when people are looking at the region as a whole and they're thinking, okay, there's people like me here, I'm going to look there, right? I think that might be helpful.
Right. And we did have, as a region, thanks to Carolyn Grossman Meager and the New York City Regional Planning Crew, we did have a regional meeting to begin those discussions about how do we unify, how do we present ourselves to the world as a, as a real regional hub. And we were talking about branding, and so we have begun those conversations. I think we need to kind of explore it a little bit further, but I think we're on that path. To really position ourselves, from a marketing, branding, and how we work together standpoint. I think we're really on the pathway to getting there. So,
Nancy, if I could, one of the things that occurs to me is for us to leverage the connectivity that we already have. Like one of the things that is I mentioned in my presentation that's abundantly clear is that this region has the best research and universities on the planet. And there's lots of connectivity among those institutions. And then, of course, there are great companies. And, Lindsey mentioned the BI is in Connecticut, BI is in New Jersey. How can we leverage the leadership of our companies that do view this already as a region? And present ourselves as a region as many of the companies and researchers already think of us as a region. And so what we're competing against is, an external idea that there's some, magical border by a body of water or some cartographer in the 1700s that somehow separates us. And then taking that together, that type of the workforce items that Sue, Lindsey, and others are talking about, combined with that leadership component from a research university standpoint and from a corporate boardroom standpoint, starts to tell that really complete story of to an external audience. It's the external audience that is maybe hemmed in and thinking about this as a bunch of different localities and municipalities. But our workers and our leaders are not thinking about it that way and act appropriately. And so it makes it a very attractive place to come into if you understand that as that's the way the ecosystem is working.
Yeah, no, absolutely. These are all really wonderful ideas and thoughts. And hopefully we can continue this conversation, and NYC Builds Bio can help, to facilitate some of this regionally and collect the information or help to market it and brand it in some way. So I just want to ask the audience, I haven't seen any questions put in the chat, although lots of people are giving you guys great compliments, great presentations, many thanks, great regional picture. Thank you, panel. Does the audience have any questions that they might like to ask of our experts? You don't often get these people in one place.
And any feedback too on, on the future presentations, right? And what we'd like to hear about most. We keep talking about accessibility and connectivity, right? Do we really want to focus on, how you can get from Queens, Long Island City to Manhattan and all the various ways to do that. So you could understand, how these places are actually so much more closely located than you would assume because of the public transportation that's available and various transportation routes.
Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
Hi, I tried to put in a chat question, but it didn't work. Thank you for everyone on the panel. This was wonderful, but I have a real estate community question. Are you guys working with the bio tenant clusters to bring them to empty office buildings in Manhattan?
Well, so I'll take this as a start, but what I would say is, we welcome through our programs talking with developers about how to develop the infrastructure that's needed. You can't just take an office building and overnight turn it into a wet lab capable space. Buildings have many requirements for that and needs. And so we work with the development community on exploring options for buildings that could be converted, knowing that takes investment and time to do that. But what I would say is that, there are companies that don't require wet lab spaces. And so certainly the real estate community, I think for all of our region, whether New York City or otherwise, is always open to discussing how to use spaces for the different types of companies and the industry. But for those more complex spaces, it requires going through quite a bit of conversion. That it's not something that where you could just say, if there's empty real estate for that or commercial real estate that's offices, you just convert it to life sciences, just like that.
And I will say that in future webinars in this series, we will be featuring buildings that have been converted from commercial office into life science, and highlighting the issues and questions surrounding them that have to be analyzed before that change can be made. I think lots of people in the different emerging subclusters in Manhattan are looking at their buildings now and trying to evaluate them. And many of our members are involved in those evaluations. So yes, we are quite busy at trying to find empty spaces that can use science-related activities.
And I think it's worth it to point out too, John was talking about, cartographers from the 1700s. We were very heavy industrial, right? New York, New Jersey, right? All because of the water that surrounds, our islands. So there is plenty of, zoned industrial space. There's a lot of buildings where manufacturing used to happen, right? Sounds crazy, but cars used to be manufactured on Manhattan Island, right? Something that you wouldn't expect, but it's true, right? And those are the spaces that are much more primed for space like this to be turned into wet lab space.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Tricia. With all of your developers and, a 20,000 up tenant, they look at, but what about the 2,500 square foot tenant, the second generation, they really don't have the credit. And are your developers in New York City? I know that in Connecticut, they've got funding, and in New Jersey, they've got funding. But where do these tenants go? I mean, are they willing to build out 35 or 30,000 square feet for these 2,500 square foot tenants?
I think it's being taken into consideration. I wouldn't say that there's strong supply for that yet, but I know that several developers have spoken to us about that type of intermediary spaces. I think the tricky part with it is that it's often not long-term like the larger 20 to 30,000 step out spaces. So there's more risk involved there. And so that's why we have some of our levers, whether that's our IDA financial support or otherwise, to think about how can we make sure that those types of resources are available. But yes, it is something that's on our radar.
With the region that we're talking about, just wanted to add that if there was companies in New York that are looking for that 2,000 to 5,000 square feet spaces, there is that available in New Haven, because that's what a lot of the developers, as you just mentioned, Susan, the risk involved is pretty high. And so some of our developers have bit the bullet, so to speak, and wanted to do 10,000 square feet, but have realized that there is a market. There's a pretty significant market for those smaller companies. And so some of them are trying it, and to see how this will work out economically. But until you have a plethora of that where you are, if someone's desperate, you could tell them to check here.
So that's another big plus for taking a regional play, right? If it's not available somewhere, it's available close by.
Right.
Okay, well, it is 1:30, so I want to thank all of you for participating in what I hope will be just the beginning of a great conversation and, ability to work together. For those of you who have time and would like to, we will open up the meeting rooms so you can meet and talk to each other. And for those of you who need to jump, please do. But thanks everyone, both those who spoke and those who attended. We really appreciate your support. And of course, to Triumvirate for sponsoring.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy.
I'm really